Hello, fellow Rebel Capitals. Hope you're well. Here with my good buddy, Robert Barnes, to talk about the Fed, FOIA, lawsuit, midterms. We got a lot to talk about, Robert. That's for sure. First of all, what do you think about the Biden administration? I mean, the White House just tweeted this out, that they are responsible for the largest increase in Social Security payments in like the last 10 years. Is that not amazing?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like, remember it was the old, wasn't it the Saturday Night Live Jimmy Carter joke that Dan Aykroyd played Jimmy Carter, and he goes, "Everything is great," and then now you have so much more money. Well,
Yeah.
with inflation, I mean, it was like we're through a. If it wasn't so sad and dangerous, it has been very comedic. The living joke of the last few years.
I mean, why not just create hyperinflation, Robert?
Yeah,
And
exactly. You
then
could
the
get a
Social
lot more
Security
money.
payments would go up by like 1,000% a month. Wouldn't that be awesome?
I'm sure AOC will be taking credit for it soon. I mean, she was explaining the government has no role in inflation. She's that people don't understand that. She has an economics background, so she understands government currency. That has nothing to do with the valuation of the currency.
Yeah, she's got to dumb it down for the plebs, like you and me, Robert.
Yes, indeed.
All right. Well, hey, I want to get into midterms, a lot of stuff, but first and foremost, let's go over an update with what's happening. Maybe just start from the beginning, a quick summary here. Robert and I moved forward, I guess, instigated a FOIA request. We did a campaign where I put up about 65 grand or so, and then we did a GoFundMe thing for the other 35 to come up with 100,000 to go ahead and do this, to instigate this FOIA request with the Fed, because we wanted to push back against a lot of things they're doing, but more specifically, them completely ignoring the Federal Reserve Act in 2020. So the way this process works, if you got to do the FOIA request first, and if they tell you to pound sand long enough, you kind of give them a deadline, then you have to go ahead and sue them. Hopefully, or we are hoping that we wouldn't have to come to the lawsuit part of it, that they'd go ahead and we do the request, we dot the I's, cross the T's. It's incredibly expensive to hire the specialist accountant to do that. But we were hoping that, okay, fine, here's what you requested. But I guess that's not the path they've taken. So, Robert, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, so we started out with some basic requests. Then we expanded it to a lot of detailed requests across the entire history of the Federal Reserve. So we wanted their internal documentation on how have they interpreted their own legal authority? How have they interpreted any limitations or restrictions or restraints on their legal authority? How have they interpreted things related to the income tax and the various revenue acts that have passed? The things we know that they have done some internal review on, we asked for everything that could possibly relate to that categorically. So not just for specific items in 2020 and some past years where we knew they took actions that appear to be outside the Federal Reserve Act, but also everything they have internally talked and discussed about their own power or the limits on that power, and how it correlates with the income tax, given, of course, Federal Reserve came in at the same time as the income tax.
Yeah.
And I've seen some documentation concerning that, at least other banks talking about what the Federal Reserve was talking about all the way back to the 1915 in the New York Public Library. So we incorporated all that, hired a forensic accountant who is also a former bank auditor to say, we want to really audit the Fed. What should we ask for? So he came up with very specific requests as if he was auditing the Federal Reserve. And we combined the two, submitted it. They gave us the runaround and the runaround and the runaround. Finally, they came back and said, we have no idea what you're talking about. But we don't have any indexed files here. We don't even know how to search our own files here at the Federal Reserve. If you could tell us exactly which day we actually did that analysis, then we can search for it. But if you don't have the exact day and the exact time, and the Fed's got away with this because apparently no one has ever.
This is the game they play. Explain that, Robert, because to the layman, they may think, well, that's a legitimate claim. But no, this is just a game to draw this out as long as possible to make sure that you're spending as much money, and they're just hoping that they drag it on long enough to where you just kind of forget about it or you run out of cash.
Exactly. What's fascinating is it's apparent that no one has ever asked for this before. So no one had even tried to FOIA the Fed until after the 2008 global financial crisis, and then some big media institutions, including Bloomberg, did. But they requested very specific information they already knew about in advance. They didn't
And
ask
they
for
were
the big.
successful. I want to make that clear too.
Absolutely. The court said, yes, in fact, the Federal Reserve Board and its constituent banks are responsible to the Freedom of Information Act under federal law because they are a sufficient government actor or have sufficient government authorities or powers that they are as accountable to the people as any other agency or organization. So that was the legal predicate and premise for us to ask this. What's fascinating is most people have been only asking for little niches of information. Like they'll say, okay, at this open market committee, I want this transcript on this date as to this subject. And no one has gone in and said, no, we want everything that you talk about. We want everything that relates to your legal authority. We want everything that relates to these whole categories of transactions you're engaging in. Because a bank, someone like the Federal Reserve and its constituent board banks have gone into great internal detail about what authority they do or don't have, and how they're going to try to get it. It's they're your classic bankers. They're going to have a lot of lawyers lined up in internal legal and political advice as to how they do this, how they do that, etc. So as soon as we launched our Freedom of Information Act request, the Federal Reserve went in and changed its own FOIA rules. Right. So that was the first thing that was striking. They're like, well, now you got to go through this protocol and that protocol and another protocol. So we went through all that, dotted all our I's, crossed all our T's, went through there's what's called in the FOIA process an appeals process. Once there's an initial denial, you go to the appeal stage. We went through that. And then they said, well, maybe if you guys resubmit it, we'll figure out what it is. We'll be able to find this stuff you guys are looking for. It's like J. Edgar Hoover. It's like, I got all these files, but I'm not sure where the index is. I kind of lost the library card, right? So we went back and did that, and we added, okay, we want to know, how do you, Federal Reserve, organize and archive all your documents? How do you index it? Since you're pretending you don't know, that you can't keyword search, you can't subject matter search, you have no idea how to do any of these things. Tell us how you organize them in the first place, how you archive them in the first place. And they even came back with that, and they're like, we don't know. We just can't help you. We would love to help you. They didn't produce a single document or a single piece of information that we're asking for, which tells us that
the only thing he gave you is his correspondence. Just basically shrugging their shoulders, saying, "Oh, I don't know," just playing stupid.
Completely. I mean, the idea that the Fed doesn't have a way to search their own internal documents, doesn't have a way to index them, has never organized or archived them, it's obviously patently false. So they have, granted, we're asking for stuff that's as old as almost 110 years old, but I guarantee you they have deep mechanism of doing so. Ironically, I came across this Washington Post how to do a FOIA video from a couple of years ago, and they did a less sophisticated version of what we did. They're saying, here's what you do. You just put in the subject matter, and they have to search it. And This was the FBI they were doing it to. But clearly, we must be absolutely on the right path, or they wouldn't be so paranoid that they're pretending they don't even know how to index their documents, how to organize their documents, how to search their documents. They have no training manual for FOIA of any kind, that their people are just completely lost, that they're like that Apple TV series C, no, everybody's blind at the Fed apparently. And so we will be filing suit. The one appeal is completely exhausted, so we can now file suit on that one. The second appeal is still technically pending on the organizational documents, but we can file suit on the first one already, and we can file suit on the second one very soon. So we'll be able to. I think their position, they're banking on the courts completely turning a blind eye, or they're just trying to buy time. Right. Because when you deny you don't even know how to search your own documents, when you don't produce a single responsive piece of information whatsoever, and we have both expansive macroscopic requests and microscopic detailed requests, they're not in a credible position, in my view, in the courts to ultimately win this. All they've done effectively is buy time. And basically, I think you're right. They try to run out the clock, and no one apparently had ever done this to the Fed ever before, requested this. And they figure, they'll go away, or that they don't really want to sue the Federal Reserve Bank and the Federal Reserve Board, and that I assume is their assumption. So yeah, pretty soon, it'll be George Gammon versus the Federal Reserve Board.
Wouldn't that be funny if during the discovery process you had to fly out there and you're like, okay, I'm here to see the documents, and they drive you down to like a U-Haul like storage unit place or something. And it's
Well,
just like papers like stacked on top of each other. It just look like a tornado just hit it. There you go, Robert. That's all we got. Sorry, we got to get back to raising interest rates.
exactly. I mean, it's extraordinary that the game that they're playing. But obviously, there must be a lot of very embarrassing information. I mean, clearly, no one had requested the specific kind of information. Ron Paul had tried to at various levels, but it was more generic when he was in Congress, and Rand Paul as well, to audit the Fed, but not the specific kind of requests that we had made. That would be from a bank auditor who drafted them. Obviously they're not accustomed to that kind of having to disclose information, because clearly they maintain a double set of books, and clearly they do a lot of funny math with a lot of how they do things internally. But I think the other bigger thing is that there's category. My guess is there's a lot of stuff in there that has, say, discussions about the limits on the income tax and what it means, and the 16th Amendment, probably going all the way back, about how it probably can't go this far and how they're going to gameplay this. Things that are not even specific necessarily to the Federal Reserve, but are embarrassing politically for a wide range of actors.
So specifically, what are we suing them for? Now, at this point, what do we tell the court? Like what is it called? We're suing the Federal Reserve because of
Under FOIA. So under the Freedom of Information Act, if the government doesn't disclose the information you request, you're entitled to file suit in federal district court to basically force them to turn it over.
So it's not like it's a completely separate lawsuit. It's still under the umbrella of the original FOIA.
Absolutely. In fact, it's governed entirely by was their response reasonable? That's one aspect. Do they have some objectionable basis under the law to not turn it over? I don't think it'll be persuasive to a federal district court. There's always a risk with federal district courts that they see Federal Reserve and they're like, hold on. The IRS maintains files on every single federal judge. People don't know this, but judges seem to be pretty deferential when it comes to the IRS. Civil case, criminal case, doesn't matter. But beyond that political bias, prejudice, fear kind of issue, they don't have any good legal grounds. And I think it will sound particularly bad that they produced absolutely nothing, number one. And number two, that they're pretending they don't know how to search or index their own documents. And number three, that they don't even have a training manual. I guarantee they have a training manual. They just didn't want to. The training manual probably references the search terms. They're trying to currently pretend they don't know how to search.
Right.
So it's not ultimately we should prevail in this case. And
that was my next question. Kind of what's your base case here? How do you think this plays out?
I think we get 80% of what we're asking for, but it might take a year to get there, depending on whether we get lucky or unlucky with the judicial draw.
Well, that's good news. That's great news. In fact, I didn't realize you were going to be that optimistic. I was getting a little down on the whole thing. Not that I didn't want to pursue it, but as far as the probability of us getting any type of documentation whatsoever. So that's great news. I'm super excited to hear that.
Yeah, that's been my experience. I mean, it just happened a few weeks ago in an IRS FOIA case that they had. They produced nothing, pretended they didn't have it, pretended that our request was there was some formality wrong with it, that they couldn't read the power of attorney right. And then, of course, 2 weeks ago they folded and said, "Yeah, we'll get it all to you in a couple of weeks."
All right. Good deal. Okay. Yes. So on that kind of, I guess there's some bad news there, but overall, I think that's very, very good news. That definitely reason to be optimistic there for sure. So moving on from that, I want to get your thoughts on Twitter and what's going on with Elon Musk, and just want to get your insights on that.
My hypothesis on Musk all along has been that he bought Twitter to get political cover because I think early on something went AWOL with the Biden administration with Musk. So I think they came to him and either wanted him to do something he didn't want to do or something like that. It's the Biden MO. And so they escalated investigations. I mean, Tesla's facing over 1,000.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think this has to do with the SEC deal?
I think it's all of it. In other words, the government has so much leverage over Musk potentially
Right.
in Tesla because of the combination of the tax benefits they could always revoke, which would send his business into a tailspin. He relies a lot on development from China. They could put that into a tailspin. And then he's got all these suits and allegations all over the place from a wide range of people, bunch of class actions, bunch of those kind of things. And then, of course, his history of conflict with the SEC being the easiest place of squeeze. And we know how political the SEC is. Some of the top people there are people tied to the Russiagate investigation by marriage or by relationships. So the SEC is currently going after certain crypto places for on very questionable grounds. So they're a very political entity. Southern District of New York, most political prosecution unit in the country by a long mile. And I think he was in trouble politically. This is my hypothesis. He was in trouble politically. He realized, okay, I got problems with the Biden administration. I need political cover so that if they ever escalate against me criminally, it will look like retaliation for my public political activity. I think he's very smart and savvy politically. Like all the criticisms of Musk, one of them is not that he's a bad marketer. The man understands marketing very, very well.
This is very interesting. I'm sorry, keep going there. Then I want to revisit a conversation I had with Chris Irons with Quote the Raven the other day.
So I think that's what his initial instinct on Twitter was, is I'm going to buy Twitter, but get a lot of political currency on the right, restore Twitter to free speech, which I think he's inclined to do anyway. I do think he's of that mindset mentality. You know, he loves the memes. He likes the fun trolling and the interactivity. And now I think he has an ancillary goal. I think he likes the mind hive aspect. I mean, he's compared it to the possibility of using like the WEF model from China as a model for Twitter. I do think he wants a lot of people to sacrifice themselves. So he and all his like kids from different, like 5 different women, however many it is, can all be little princes up on Mars. So, I think there's a little bit of this stuff I don't super trust about Musk. I mean, the transhumanism and some other stuff's like, well, hold on a second. Yeah. And he's made some promises over the years that, those underground tunnels, those hyper tunnels and all that stuff, a lot of that stuff, quite, that we're not near self-automated cars, et cetera. Tesla is a valuation, I think, is like 10 times the combined car valuations of companies that actually do sell and make a lot of cars compared to Tesla. But I think I think it was a smart political move on his, because now if the Biden administration tries to retaliate with SEC criminal charges or anything else, it will look like political retaliation. And so I think he's bought himself some political cover, some political immunity. I think it was a smart and savvy move on his part. He even got himself out of the leverage issues he had in the summer by saying, hey, I'm not going to do it. And then he got the same deal in the fall when those issues had resolved. And so I think he's playing it smart. He's got a huge treasure trove of internal information because he now has all of Twitter's internal DMs. And he's already leaking some of them that show that the lawyers were lying to the court, big, powerful corporate law firm, about the Twitter sale. And there's probably a lot of embarrassing information corresponded to the Intercept report this week about how the government was in bed colluding with big tech for the last several years, beginning with the pandemic. I mean, Trump's own administration was colluding against Trump. I mean, that's how extraordinary it was. I'm sure Musk is sitting on tons of that. I mean, that is people DM a lot, and those government actors probably DM a lot. Some of those people DM a lot. So he's sitting on a treasure trove of information as well. So I think he's bought himself some political leverage, got a nice treasure trove of information to fight back if he needs to against the Biden administration. And he has probably both sincere and less than ideal motivations at the same time for what he's going to do with Twitter down the road.
Great. Nuanced view there. I think that's what's missing in so many people's take when they look at Musk, is it's just they either put him in he's a good guy or a bad guy camp, and that's it. But what we have to understand is that people, in fact, every one of us is a combination of both those things. It's just to what degree here. None of us are perfect, but then very few of us are just pure evil either. It's just again, to what degree.
Yeah. We all can't be Bill Gates.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And the conversation I had with Chris was, I was thinking more of from a standpoint of business. I said, okay, if you're Musk, you've won the hardcore, green activists, climate change. They're going to buy your car forever, right? Pretty much regardless of what you do. Now, there's some people, of course, I'm overgeneralizing. There's some people that say, oh, now he's turned free speech advocate. I'm not going to buy a Tesla again. Okay, but for the most part, the Tesla lemmings or whatever they used to be called, they're going to stick with him and they're going to like whatever he's doing. So if you look at his position, the majority of the people that didn't really like Tesla, they didn't put them in a favorable light. They probably weren't going to go out and buy a Tesla anytime soon. Pretty much the people on the right, for the most part. And so if you want to, how do you cater? How do you entice that 50% of the US population to consider buying a Tesla in the future? Buy Twitter, stand up for free speech, something that they're adamant about and that they feel as though they're threatened because they're being attacked. Now, all of a sudden, you win over that group of customers that you never would have been able to win over any other way. And so that's kind of the angle that I was looking, or the lens I was looking at it through. But what you're saying from the political standpoint, I think might even make even more sense. There's probably, you can't just say there's one reason he bought it. There's probably like 10 different reasons that he bought it. And all of them together, prompted him or incentivized him to go ahead and pull the trigger.
And the Twitter people talking smack to him probably didn't help any. In terms of, he was like, okay, I got a lot of FU money. Well, let's see how this works out for you. I'm going to fire you and not pay you that severance, and you can litigate it, see how it works out.
So how do you think he will manage Twitter? I mean, you said that you're not a big fan of stuff he's done in the past, but also he may have had some ulterior motives that he's not disclosing about buying it. But you think that overall, maybe he's taking it in the right direction, or am I putting words in your mouth?
I mean, definitely a much better direction than it was in. No doubt about that. It was being run by wokesters. I mean, so much so that that's probably the real reason Dorsey left. I mean, Dorsey, for all of his issues, I think didn't like how bad it had got in terms of free speech. I sued Twitter like 6 years ago. And
Jones, right? Or
it was for Charles Johnson, who had made very personal accusations against Jack Dorsey. Did some other stuff that was a little controversial, but we had internal information that showed they targeted him for censorship, and we brought all the claims that now are being up before the U.S. Supreme Court, different ways to attack Section 230, etc. But during that time period, we had negotiations with Twitter's counsel, their big corporate law firm, and said, look, why don't you just incorporate these kind of the rules that Rumble now has, free speech type rules. You can limit, the trolls and the things that people really don't want, the harassment, etc. But, no politically based discrimination, no viewpoint based discrimination, and you'll be a lot better off. And apparently Dorsey was gung ho with that, agreed with that, one of those rules, but couldn't get it through the Twitter board. So because of how other people had taken over, co-opted it. And then George Soros was sporadically shorting them if they didn't play games, so he went after Facebook. That's why Zuckerberg was doing big private investigations on Soros behind the board, behind the scenes, because of those issues, because Soros was trying to leverage everything after the 2016 election that he could for political gain. So I think that those dynamics, so you can't get better than you can't get worse than where it was at. I think he is very sincere he's talking about, an $8, subscription-based service to get your blue check mark that will highlight your searches, that will highlight your replies, that will highlight your commentary. That's probably smart. He can probably find a way to monetize Twitter in a better way than it was being monetized. And I think it's in his interest to promote robust speech, even if he has some ulterior motives along the way. For example, in order to have that kind of WEF, hive mind, mass gathering of intel and information, the surveillance aspect of big tech, you need to not censor people. You need to know what they're thinking, when they're thinking, how they're thinking it, how people react collectively, etc. This goes into his AI theories and theories about developing sort of combined robotic human beings that could actually live on Mars, because that's the only thing that can live on Mars. It's not normal human beings that can live on Mars, at least from everything I've seen. So I think it serves his interest to promote free speech. And then it's going to be fun, no doubt about it. He makes Trump look like a second-tier troll. His ability, like the New York Times attacked him he quoted a publication that has a history of publishing crazy stuff out of Santa Monica about the Pelosi thing. And so that's why he withdrew it. He didn't realize what he had published. But the New York Times said, "Oh, Elon Musk puts out fake news." And so Musk retweeted and he says, that's a total lie. I haven't retweeted the New York Times in years. I mean, so it's, boom, boom. It's going to be entertaining at a minimum.
Yeah. Do you think Trump will get back on?
My understanding is he has an exclusive arrangement with Truth. So he doesn't actually own Truth. He's promoted as owning it. He doesn't. My understanding is an exclusive marketing deal. And of course, they're under massive SEC inquiry for how they handled things. They have some internal issues with people they laid off. So there's a lot of issues there present. But my understanding is I don't think he can go on Twitter without the Truth people saying he's violated our exclusive marketing arrangement. So I think he can't for the time being.
What's your view on the Pelosi situation?
That story is really weird. I mean, there's just,
that's why I wanted to get your thoughts on it.
So, I mean, well, one of the things when I do like false flag theories, I do this little hush hush series on my locals channel, vivabarneslaw.locals.com. And one of the main things I highlight is if you're looking for a false flag event, and that was an event, and people get like during the Alex Jones trials, they kept saying false flag meant the event didn't happen. That's not what it means. It's the old pirates who would put up a false flag to fool somebody so they could get close to the ship and board it and steal their loot. It's wrong cause. So you look at I said the number one thing is you'll have unusual security lapses. That's the number one common denominator in any kind of questionable like whether it's the Kennedy assassination, whether it's January 6th, so that one sign that there's something amiss with the official narrative is unusual security lapses. Here, there was no security that night around Pelosi's house. And now the story comes out that there actually were security cameras, that they were Capitol Police security cameras, but no one was watching. Well, where's the actual camera? Why don't you just show us the footage, right? This guy supposedly just walked up. I mean, he's like a half-stoned Berkeley kook. I mean, we've all met those people in San Francisco.
There's a lot of them there. Yeah.
Absolutely. This guy just walked into the Pelosi house all the way up to the bedroom. It's like, you got to be kidding me. And that makes no sense at all. Now, how that could happen.
Robert, before you move forward, let's back up here a little bit, because I don't think a lot of people understand the security that's usually involved with a politician's house, including me. I don't really know how that works. So if you're a Nancy Pelosi, what would usually be the type of security? Would you have actual guys out there like doing laps and stuff, or would you just have the cameras, or how does that usually work?
Usually you would have fourfold level of security. Because she's Speaker of the House, the Secret Service is supposed to provide security because she's number 3 in line for the presidency.
Wow.
They changed that after the assassination of Robert Kennedy to expand. And not only that, you also are supposed to keep secure their family members. That's why Trump's family had Secret Service. Donald Trump Jr. had Secret Service, people like that. So one, there should have been Secret Service present. Second is Capitol Police. Because she's the Speaker of the House, the Capitol Police provide. And Pelosi is trying to expand the power of Capitol Police. She's using January 6th, and she'll probably use this incident, ironically, to suggest that Capitol Police should have broad standing jurisdiction to basically be like a roaming Congress's personal Stasi, personal FBI that could investigate any quote unquote threat or risk to a member of Congress. But there's no dispute here that Capitol Police, but she's Speaker of the House, they already do provide security to any place she lives or resides. And they had actual cameras there outside the House. It's come out. The third level of security is some form of private security, typically for someone of this status and wealth. You're talking about a lot of money, a lot of power, a lot of influence. So typically they would have multiple bodyguards, multiple people on watch all night, along with the cameras and electronic systems. Difficult to enter the physical property, difficult to enter it. To give an example, Harmy Dillon went through how impossible it was for her to simply serve a suit on Pelosi because of how much security was around the house. It was like multiple layers and levels of it.
Wow.
Somehow, I mean, they still haven't really explained this, but it appears the official narrative requires that there was no security present at all, that none of the cameras were working or anyone was watching them at all, that there was no security on the door. I mean, like there was no alarm. There's no alarm on your door. I mean, you're the Pelosi family. You're one of the wealthiest and most corrupt political families in America. I mean, that goes back to her dad being mayor of Baltimore. I mean, years ago, her brother dodged a sexual assault verdict where everybody else got convicted and he magically walked. It was a group assault case. I mean, that's the history. You can dig into her family's history in Baltimore. It's not a beacon of, it's Biden-esque corruption. They had
Right.
no security on their door. I mean, they didn't even have an alarm. You
Yeah,
could just
right.
not a crazed loon from Berkeley could just walk in with a hammer. I mean, none of it makes sense. Now, one possibility is that he piggybacked, maybe accidentally, off of something else. Because it was like Bill Clinton, right? When Bill Clinton wrote on the Epstein Lolita Express there, he told Secret Service, "You don't need to be around for this trip. Yeah, you guys could stay home. I got a little vacationing to do." So usually that may be a backstory, but something about this story does not make sense at all. Just from a basic security protocol, given available information. I mean, the cops purportedly both had body cameras that showed up. Why haven't we seen that body camera footage? Think about all the controversial
Is
police
that
shootings.
commonplace though for them to release that, Robert?
Well,
That footage?
here's the analogy. Think about what happens at a police shooting. They demand that body camera footage get released right away, right? In fact, they accuse them of covering up if the police don't. And it is the case that body camera footage, there's no right of privacy in it. There's no interest of privacy in it legally. That's been litigated multiple times. Analogous FOIA context, where the media will sue and demand the release of it. So you would think if the story was what they claimed it was, and it would, support a scandalous allegation because they were trying to blame the Republicans for this on the eve of the election, that they would be eager to release security camera footage showing that guy breaking in, eager to show him attacking Pelosi. Instead, we're getting nothing. No video footage of any kind is being released, and no explanation of the lapses of security being disclosed. So something is AWOL. I just don't know what it is. I have a buddy of mine that's done a lot of research on the MK Ultra context, and his first reaction was that this feels like MK Ultra 1960s. Feels like Saran. This guy has an unusual background. He was associated with BLM and the nudist and the rainbow crowd and the left, and supposedly he overnight created a blog that people are looking at, and they're saying it doesn't even look like this blog was even created within the time frame that was originally suggested. So there's everything about, and then he shows up in court. Supposedly he sort of confessed to the feds that led to a federal indictment, and then he shows up in court and he has injuries that are apparently associated with his interrogation. So there's everything about this smacks of weird. And my guess is there's some scandals underneath it. Whether and when we'll ever find out, though, will be another question.
It reminds me of the Jesse Smollett thing. Not saying that, but just how weird it is, and it doesn't make
absolutely
sense.
Yeah, I mean, when they were blaming it on a Trump supporter, I was like, hold on a second. A Trump supporter's hanging out in San Francisco and with nudist camps and going into Pelosi's house at 2 a.m. I was like, no, that makes no sense at all. That's a popular meme right now, is they have Jesse Smollett saying that he got beat up by two guys in Tesla hats, and they said, this is Twitter country, just because they may make fun of it. But yeah, the media narrative has huge holes in it. And it implicates Pelosi. It implicates whatever the real truth is, negatively implicates Pelosi, negatively implicates the Capitol Police.
Wow. That is so. How do you think this is? There people that are going to continue to push on this, to pull on threads to try to find the truth, or is it just kind of now it's just set in stone and the mainstream media is just going to repeat the same thing over and over and over again?
The mainstream media will definitely do their bit. And that's why they were so agitated that Twitter is now free Twitter, and that Musk even was raising questions about it, because they needed to control the narrative, and the big tech, big media, government collusion has been key to that happening at an effective level. They still haven't been able to fully control it. There's enough independent media out there to challenge it and contest it, but not at the level of having Twitter as a platform where they could do so. And I think that's why they were so bothered, because, as an example, they just started crowdsourcing, looking at Wayback Archives to figure out whether this guy's supposed right-wing blog over the past several months was legit or not. And they started pointing out there's all these anomalies, that it doesn't appear, it's not apparent that it was even set up until a day or two before in some cases. And these are just people who know a lot about the internet, and they're crowdsourcing research and investigation. So if any aspect of what they're saying is accurate, that's just one area where they're going to be popping holes in it. And I think you'll see tons of other people continue to crowdsource this because people can smell a rat. And so I think we'll continue to get good crowdsourced, challenging, questioning, contesting the official narrative, exposing issues with it. There'll be plenty of FOIA requests. There'll be by the way, one reason they may have used the Capitol Police is it's the one body that is not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. So Congress is exempt from it, and their police are exempt from it. And so that allows them to do a lot of things in secret. But the San Francisco police body cameras, that is subject to California's Open Records Act. If they're actually going to go forward with these criminal prosecutions, a lot of information will come out that way, especially if the guy gets competent counsel at any level. That's a big open question. The history of these kind of defendants is that they get compromised, captured counsel that are not independently defending people, like Saran, like Timothy McVeigh, like a range of other people that didn't want to dig to where they could dig. But I think there'll be enough public digging that we'll find surprise down the road that shows that the public narrative, the media narrative, was false.
Do you question how the door was opened for the police?
Yeah, because originally they suggested it was a third person. Then they realized that's controversial, so they said no third person is there. But then they have no explanation for how the door got open.
Yeah, that's what I mean. If they're battling over a hammer, and I haven't read more than just a couple articles on this, but correct me if I'm wrong, but they're battling over a hammer, and then the door just magically opens by itself. The cops are there, and then the one crazy dude grabs the hammer away from Mr. Pelosi and just starts beating him on the head while the cops are sitting there watching him with the door mysteriously opened by no one.
I mean, all of it makes no sense. It's like, here's a police officer. You see two people fighting over the hammer. You just sit there and watch like it's a UFC fight. Oh, let's see how this turns out. Yeah, I mean, it does. And there's a lot of memes out there about different stuff. And so, and this is the same Paul Pelosi who just a few months ago was caught DUI, got a light sentence over it. So there's clearly some issues pending. Now, of course, to give people an idea, the Pelosi family not only has old Democratic ties to Baltimore, but there's overlaps between them and the Newsom family and Getty family. So that you have this political cadre in California that has managed to protect themselves over and over and over again. I mean, Newsom's been caught in Lord knows how many scandals and then never faces meaningful consequence for it. And San Francisco's DA's office is very compromised. So you can't expect an honest, independent criminal investigation to take place either by the Biden Justice Department or the other. But there's just basic stories that people have listened to, and they're like, this doesn't add up at all. Yeah. Something is AWOL, and the only question is what and how much.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm definitely going to have to follow this story now. That's for sure. I didn't realize the whole security dynamic behind what was going on, but boy, it sure it makes a lot more sense now as to why it doesn't make sense and why we should be questioning it. Again, reminding me of exactly like the Jesse Smollett. Like every day that went on, there were more and more questions like, what? Well, wait a minute here. When we're trying to connect these dots and just nothing seems to add up. What do you think about the midterms? Well, I know you really follow politics, and a lot of times you place wagers on like who's going to win the presidential election. So you really got your finger on the pulse here. What do you think is going to happen during midterms? And do you think it's going to matter? How do you think it's going to play out over the next 6 months, year?
So for basically the last 6 months or so, the bets that I've been recommending to people and putting out has been that Republicans would get 53 or more Senate seats. They would get 245 or more House seats, that they would get 31 or more governorships, that they would win a lot of these close contested races for the Senate in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada. And that they had a fighting chance in places like New Hampshire. And all of that has come to fruition as people as the media caught up to what was happening on the ground. Yeah. Same with the House. It's going to be a Democratic bloodbath on next Tuesday. I don't see them having much. Republicans are definitely going to take back the House. The only question is how big is their majority. And the bigger their majority, the more populist presence will be there in both the House and the Senate. That will put pressure on Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy to be less obstreperous, less establishment oriented, less corrupt. They still will be mostly useless as leaders, but they might be forced to do things like have impeachment hearings of cabinet officials and even Biden himself to finally stop all the money that's pouring into that ridiculous war in Ukraine that we should have no business with, to things like that. It basically will be a check on the excesses of the Biden administration. And in terms of the governorships, I think Republicans are going to take back Nevada, take back Wisconsin, keep Arizona, Georgia, and Florida somewhat safely to some degree. And they have a fighting shot against these lockdown-loving governors in places like Maine, places like Michigan, places like Minnesota, places like Oregon. I think they'll pick up at least one of those four, maybe two or more. And that's also significant for the 2024 because you're going to have much more election integrity-oriented state officials from top to bottom in Georgia, Arizona, Wisconsin, just for starters. And those were the three states that decided 2020. So, and then maybe in Michigan, maybe in Pennsylvania, maybe in Oregon, maybe in other states. And then I think culturally, it will send a shockwave through the political establishment, and it will show them that wokeism is not popular at all. That they should reconsider that entirely. They're losing their core middle class suburban woman vote that they were depending on. They thought abortion and the abortion decision of the U.S. Supreme Court to send it back to the states would cause this huge influx back, a return of the suburban woman voter. Instead, the suburban woman voter is more concerned with inflation, more concerned with the fact that her kid's school is, the kid's 6 years old and the teacher's talking about their personal sex life with them.
Right,
this is not okay by parents, even moderate to liberal-minded parents. They're like, only your hardcore urban lefty accepts any of wokeism. That's the irony of wokeism. It was something that 80% of the country always rejected and had no interest in. And then not only that, they have to deal with crime. Crime is just spiraling out of control in big cities. It's like the video you did all the way back at the beginning of the pandemic said, here are the risk factors of how they respond certain ways. Inflation was a big one and crime was a big one, depending on how things work. Well, we got both and we got them in abundance. Yeah. And the fact that Oregon is at risk, the fact that the New York governor's race is at risk for Democrats, this is a plus 20 Democratic state, tells you that people are like, things have gotten too out of control. Because remember, they ran against Trump as the chaotic president. Put Biden in and everything will be cool and calm again. It's been just the opposite, an escalation and an acceleration of crime, inflation, wokeness, just your everyday life being disturbed. You could be a middle America suburban housewife, and you have a daily issue either at school, at the grocery store, or going to the park.
Yeah,
these things have been, and that's why Democrats are doomed come election day. They may try to fortify the election in certain places. I call it election fornication rather than election fortification. But but there's not many states they can pull it off as well as 2020 because they changed the rules and people got much more active at watching and monitoring what was happening. And they know more and more people got self-educated as to their rights, their ability to watch drop boxes, their ability, which was constitutionally protected by a federal court last week in Arizona, their right to watch at the polls, their right to know what to look for in terms of questionable ballots. They won a Pennsylvania Supreme Court case that said they have to set aside these undated ballots that Democrats might have been trying to flood the polls with. So so far, mail-in balloting is way down. It's like 80 to 90% declines in some states and jurisdictions. And so you need massive mail-in balloting to sneak in the questionable ballots. And without mass mail-in balloting, you're not going to be able to win these elections other than actually with honest votes. And so I think that ability, there may be issues. There's big issues obviously going on in Brazil currently. You may have issues in Nevada. You may have issues in New York. You may have issues in Pennsylvania. But it won't be the same scale of problems as 2020.
Yeah, I know. I think this is one of the talking points for Carrie Lake in Arizona. Did you meet her when you were at our
Yeah,
mastermind event?
that was the first time I met her.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I'm glad that you guys were able to meet there. What do you think of Carrie outside of just meeting her face to face?
Two things I mean, it was clear actually at the mastermind get together. Naturally telegenic, a natural star. So
Yeah.
from a being able to be a political figure, knowing how to communicate quickly, knowing how to communicate effectively, knowing how to look good while you do it, she has that in spades. And probably other than Trump, probably the most telegenic, probably the best since Sarah Palin. People forget that about Palin. Palin was very telegenic when she came on the stage, but a lot sharper than Palin, a lot
Mhm.
quicker, and because she came up with the media, so she knows how to deal with them well.
Yeah.
And so that's part one. Part two is really going to depend on what kind of team she puts around her. If she puts a really good team around her, she could be more effective than DeSantis has even been in Florida. And
Mm.
as governor of Arizona, she's going to obviously escalate the issue of immigration because she's talking about declaring it an invasion and asserting certain unique constitutional remedies with that. That will likely go through the court system. But being creative, being inventive is the way to do it as a governor. There's tons of opportunities available given what's happening in schools, what's happening in elections, and she, because she's on the border, has unique issues and a unique approach she can deal with in terms of both drugs and illegal immigration right there as well, because it's a major fentanyl place, it's a major drug coming in place. So I think she has the potential. I mean, there's people talking about her. She has future presidential potential if she delivers on what she can do as governor. The key is to not make the mistake Trump did, to make the right decision that DeSantis did, which is put a lot of really smart people around you that are
Yeah.
creative, that are loyal to you, that are willing to break through some places like Reagan and as governor of California in the mid 60s. Really he was at the front edge of taking on the excesses of the protest movement, other excesses, etc. She has that kind of opportunity and has presidential potential, frankly, more so, at least from a telegenic perspective, than DeSantis. I mean,
Yeah.
so I
I've
think she
always
is.
said I like Carrie a lot. Like we were talking. She spoke at our mastermind group that collected that with Kenny McElroy and Jason Hartman, and you were nice enough to speak there as well. I think that was our first one in Arizona, and I think she's good friends with Kenny. Is how we got her to come down and speak. And this is when she was kind of a nobody. And then I've been to a couple fundraising events for her in Scottsdale, and she doesn't get economics as much as I'd like her to. She's definitely not a Ron Paul, but the one thing I do like about her is I think she's got integrity, and she doesn't know a lot about certain things, but I think she can learn, and especially if she gets the right people around her. But I think her intentions are good. I don't think her intentions are to just be this megalomaniac, usurping power and control, and Mitch McConnell or Nancy Pelosi type. She truly does want to do what's right for the community, and hopefully, if we could just give her some books on Mises or Rothbard or something like that, and get have her do some consultations with Ron Paul. I think that would be great. But my main point is, I might not agree with her on everything, but at least I think her intentions are good.
Oh, absolutely. And I think she's a breath of fresh air. And she'll have a Ron Paul aficionado probably in the U.S. Senate along with her there to help on the federal side, and Blake Masters. And she could talk to Blake and some other people to help field her cabinet with the right people. Because that's the institutional Republicans are all incompetent, not just corrupt. And
Yeah.
so the key, Trump made the mistake of putting a lot of those people in positions of power. Often, many of them are undermining him on a daily basis, as the Intercept story about big tech, big government collusion details. Fauci and Birx, of course, were doing so in the pandemic. He made one bad decision after the other. Same with the vaccines. Decisions that I know he probably privately regrets, but will not publicly admit. And so the key for Lake is put the right people around you. If you put the right people around you that are creative and smart, not part of the establishment, the best thing that can be on their resume is that they have no government service in their history. That's who you should look for. Don't look for anybody that says they have government service. That should be the
Right.
net X.
All right. So moving from Kerry, let's talk about Fetterman. What is I hadn't followed that at all until the debate the other night, and I just watched a couple clips of that, and I just honestly I couldn't believe my eyes. I mean, I really feel sorry for the guy. I do, but my goodness gracious, I don't see how you could argue that he's competent enough to lead. Have you been following this?
Yeah, I call him Uncle Festerman, because that's what he looks like. I mean, he's got that like hunchback in Notre Dame thing going on. I don't know what that is, but I mean, he hides out all the time in these like big over. He looks like a pothead. With those those hoodies that he likes. He loves to wear. It's like you're running for the U.S. Senate, man. So the media covered up so much. It was clearly on this guy. He took the shot. And after he took the shot, he had a stroke. So, and if you
I didn't know
research,
that. I
yeah,
didn't.
exactly.
Okay, wow.
That's
I
the
knew
other
he had a
reason the media
stroke,
has
but I didn't realize it was right after the
exactly.
medical.
That's the other reason the media has sat on that story, because for those of us out there that are in that issue, that is a unfortunate, commonly reported side effect. And since then, the media has just hid the story. But like one media person sat down with him, and he had a whole screen transcribing things, and it still went bad. And the media person just reported on this, saying he has trouble reading off a screen. There's fundamental issues here, and the Democrats got enraged, and they ended up doing what the Arizona Democrat didn't do, which is go into a debate. And he really couldn't afford that. They had convinced that they had lied to themselves enough that not just to the world, but that he was fine. And I watched him plenty of times since he had the stroke, and I was like, no, he's not fine. He gets basic stuff confused. He gets lost in different places. I can tell you what Democrats are planning. If he won, they were going to replace him with his wife. That was what was going to happen. They were not going to let him actually be U.S. Senator. They were just, after he won, said, okay, now you need to step down. Don't worry, we're going to make your wife, who's much more radical, by the way, than he is to the left. And they would have 6 years of her. Particularly if they assume Shapiro, the Democrat, will win the governorship there in Pennsylvania. So I think that's what was,
Now,
Democrats.
what's their game plan? I know that I've heard some people in the media on the left say, oh, well, if you don't vote for him now that you're discriminating against disabled people or something. I'm just like, yeah, unfortunately, your mental faculties are a big part of the job.
The way I've told people is, look, getting a degree from special ed school is not grounds to go to the U.S. Senate. I'm all glad for you, and I'm proud for you, and I hope you do well in life. I'm not sending you to the U.S. Senate. Sorry. So and it's fascinating the media's reaction, because anytime Republicans have had any kind of health issues, I mean, they even went after Trump. They've just attacked. This person's not competent. This person's too dangerous. This person's a loon. This person can't function. Even when they had nowhere near the mental limitations that Uncle Festerman clearly has.
Right.
And what I tell people is, like, you can be sympathetic with disabled all you want. That doesn't, we don't go looking at victims and say, okay, we're going to give you lots of power now because you're a victim. I mean, this is part of the distorted mindset of the left in general. I mean, it's kind of like the craziness of the Alex Jones Sandy Hook trial. It's like, oh, something terrible happened to you. You now are our moral God, and we have to accept whatever you tell us, because you're the king victim. You're the victim of victims. Right. This mindset is a distorted mindset that undermines societies, undermines economies, undermines cultures, undermines governments, and is not a good one at all.
What's your take? Because I know your partner is up in Canada. Is he still up there? No, he moved to Florida, didn't he?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He had to escape. He couldn't handle his kids getting discriminated against because of the not taking the jab.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think I can't remember where I spoke to him last, Robert. Maybe it was, I can't remember. But anyway, he told me that he was going down to Florida because he was really looking forward to doing some bass fishing down there. I guess he's a real big fisherman. But I wanted to get your take on what's happening with this new gal, Smith, I think her name is, in Calgary. And she just came out the other day and said that she was reneging on the agreement that they had, the consulting agreement with the World Economic Forum. And I was reading this article, and the article was, kind of about something else, that she was a conspiracy theorist or something like that. And it just kind of gradually mentioned that they had this consulting agreement. I'm like, what? How is this not news? That the Canadian government or branch or whatever, the Canadian government has a consulting agreement with Klaus. I mean, how is nobody talking about this? And then to make matters worse, it's a health consulting agreement, as if Klaus, or as if the World Economic Forum is some sort of specialist. And I kind of did some more digging, and I found that what was happening, according to the records, is the World Economic Forum was acting as a liaison between the local government and like the Mayo Clinic. But then I'm like, okay, do we really need the World Economic Forum, the World Economic Forum as a middleman in this group here? And then my next question was, are they getting paid? And I couldn't find that information. I mean, I'm assuming they're not doing this for free. And then that leads to the question is, okay, well, Klaus brags about having all these politicians in his program, you know, the young political leader program or whatever. Trudeau was one, Putin was one, Macron, I think, Merkel. And he's bragging about how he has all of this influence of these political leaders that are in power right now. So is this, I mean, where my mind goes is, okay, this seems obvious that he's helping these people get elected through his massive influence, and they're just giving him a payback, saying, okay, well, we're going to spend an extra, $10 billion fighting COVID. And what we're not going to tell people is that we're paying you $100 million as a consultant, as kind of payback for getting me elected in the first place. But I'm curious I'm sure you guys have talked about this on your podcast. So what insights do you have there?
So, I mean, it's credit to her, because when she was previously kind of pro-vaccine mandate, as I recall, and she's reversed all of her positions, recognized she made mistakes. I mean, not like the Atlantic begging for amnesty after they screwed everybody. And
I had that written down to ask you that next. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. Not like that one. But so credit to her for taking proactive stance, for exposing some of these underlying issues. What I see is the World Economic Forum is an extension. I date it all back to Rockefeller. So Rockefeller really brainstormed how to not only recreate his own image in public marketing, but how to institute his agenda using non-governmental organizations, setting up think tanks, setting up the American Cancer Society founder, not a cancer doctor, John D. Rockefeller. That's the founder of the American Cancer Society. And then you wonder why the American Cancer Society went in certain directions at key times over its history. That basically organizations that look like public health entities, look like public educational entities. I mean, Rockefeller single-handedly restructured medical education in America. This guy has no medical background at all. His dad was a literal snake oil salesman who went around having like kids everywhere he went. I mean, that's who John D. Rockefeller was. Really good at being a monopolist, really good at buying off state power, really good at all of that, both in railroads and in oil. People forget it was both. And good at, and of course, but he had a very distinct public policy agenda, and it concerned medicine, but in particular, it was eugenics. He was the number one propagandist and preacher of eugenics. They had places set up in Nazi Germany, even before it became Nazi Germany, to utilize eugenics. Rockefeller was a key. Standard Oil helped out the Nazi economy at key times early on. So the same with the Japanese fascists that he was promoting. Was a help with Standard Oil. So you look at Rockefeller, and he kind of provides the template. In fact, Bill Gates has said this repeatedly, that he and his father idolized John D. Rockefeller and decided to recreate what they did in public philanthropy based on Rockefeller, who always managed to get wealthy. All of a sudden there was a new use for petroleum products and patented drugs. Patented drugs took over U.S. medicine. Why? Because Rockefeller helped co-author a report that basically shut down half the medical schools in America because natural health was bad. Natural health wasn't the science. The science was patented drugs that were going to help his drug company pals and himself, but also be part of a medical agenda that embraced eugenics. I mean, we went from natural health being the dominant medical teaching in America's medical colleges into about 20 years later, half of those colleges being gone, literally off the map, and eugenics being the driving teaching in medical schools in the 1920s. Late 19-teens, all the way through the 1920s. All due to John D. Rockefeller. Single-handedly did it. Bill Gates has replicated that. The World Economic Forum parallels that. And so, I mean, even Politico, 2017, Europe, wrote an expose article from a bunch of public health people saying there's a huge problem. Bill Gates is co-opting the entire public health apparatus of the entire globe, not just the United States, not just Europe, but the entire globe. They're like, you don't want one guy who's not even a medical guy running the world's public health. Well, we saw what that looked like in 2020. And in 2021 to some degree with the vaccines that he's obsessed with. You look at who's invested in CEPI and, for pandemic preparation and all that stuff. You'll find the kind of connections. I mean, what Schwab did was piggyback off of Bill Gates and say, we've got all these agendas that actually parallel a lot of what Bill Gates wants. I mean, Bill Gates is obsessed with digital identification. He was neck deep in that in India. Of course, obsessed with control of having fake food, replacing real food. I mean, Bill Gates is the number one landowner of farmland in America. This guy's not a farmer. This guy wants fake food. Why is he the number one landowner of this stuff? So if you look at John D. Rockefeller and what he did in the teens and the 20s, you're going to see Bill Gates doing the same thing and Klaus Schwab piggybacking off of that. And that's why they keep showing up in places they had no business. Imperial College of London, number one funder, Bill Gates. The University of Washington that put out all the models that said the world was going to end in America, number one funder, Bill Gates. Right next to the U.S. government, the biggest funder of the World Health Organization, Bill Gates. The number one all the fact checker organizations, one of the top 1-2 funders, Bill Gates. So the media fact checking Bill Gates's claims are institutions that are heavily funded by Bill Gates. So he took the Rockefeller model, applied it broadly, intrusively, and Klaus Schwab is just representing it and piggybacking off of it because they share a lot of the same population control obsessions.
Yeah. I just gave a speech in New Orleans at the New Orleans Investment Conference, and I was trying to connect some of the dots for people. And the approach I took, and I'd love to get your feedback on this, is to go all the way back to Machiavelli and the Prince, because that, I think, influenced Kissinger to a significant degree. And Klaus will readily admit that Kissinger had a huge impact on his worldview. And then you combine that, you fast forward a few hundred years, and you go to Thomas Malthus. And if you read what Malthus said and kind of this Malthusian view of the world, I mean, it is exactly what they spew today. It's the same exact regurgitated narrative that we've heard over and over and over again, that we saw come up in 68, the Club of Rome. And then Klaus has the guy that wrote The Limits to Growth. Remember that one? He had him as the keynote speaker in Davos, I think in 72 or 73. I mean, even Milton Friedman, I've watched YouTube videos of him debunking The Limits to Growth, that paper. And then after that point, you see Klaus come out and always talk negatively about Friedman. Always. Whenever he has the opportunity, he likes to throw Friedman under the bus. So for me, the main drivers of their worldview today was Machiavelli and how to get things done. And then Thomas Malthus, as far as the world being out of equilibrium because we just have too many people and not enough resources.
Yeah. And down deep, they're still eugenicists. And I mean, what happened was, unfortunately for the eugenicists, Nazis gave them a bad look. It turned out that was a good PR. So they've had to wait a little while. But, but that's who they are at core. So you sort of combine that Machiavellian mindset, a Malthusian ideology, and the Rockefeller model, and you get the modern World Economic Forum and Bill Gates.
Yeah. And, I did a story the other day, too. I don't know if you saw this on Melinda. I guess she changed her name to, what is it now? It's not Melinda Gates. She put in
Melinda French Gates.
French Gates. There you go. Because she wants to distance herself from Epstein, while at the same time she wants to maintain the Gates name, because that's really the only thing that gives her any clout whatsoever. But she came out really bashing this Supreme Court decision with the Roe versus Wade thing, right? And she was talking about how this doesn't represent any woman in America, not even one, Robert, not even one. And then I forgot how the article concluded, but it's basically her talking about how we have to give women their right to choose and all these things, and we have to support the what's it called, the clinic they always go to,
Planned Parenthood.
The Planned Parenthood. There you go. and how we need to do all these things. And then I pull up an article showing that the #1 cause of death in the United States for the Black community is abortion. And I'm like, okay, well, you've got this gal that's pushing this. I mean, isn't this interesting that, and she's also a Malthusian. So it's like, okay, maybe the Malthusians are saying, yes, we want to reduce the population, but now it seems like they're taking the approach that we want to reduce just a specific portion of the population, combining not only combining Malthus, combining Machiavelli, and then combining eugenics.
Absolutely. You look at their history. I mean, the Gates family actually has ties to eugenics going all the way back to the 1920s, 1930s. So there's that aspect. But there's no, I mean, Planned Parenthood was a eugenics-driven organization from day one. People can read all the different stuff. Not only Sanger wrote, but a lot of people associated with Sanger in Planned Parenthood wrote. And its deep affiliation with eugenics goes all the way to its very origination. But there's people can go see, like, there's an old CBS interview, 60 Minutes interview of Melinda French Gates, where it's just shocking how honest they are. They're walking through an African village, and the 60 Minutes guy says, "Can you imagine these people having a bunch of kids?" And right around the village. I mean, it's like, why don't you just make it more apparent, more self-evident, your bigotry? And she's like, yes, that's why we need abortion. That's why we need this. That's why we need this. We got to. I mean, I had a conversation when I was at Yale. Justice Breyer's daughter and me and another guy set up a debate society where we'd have a conversation. Somebody would speak 45 minutes, then everybody would have dinner with professors, other people, and they would discuss that night's discussion. We did one with Planned Parenthood as my introduction to him. And I sat next to the guy. And he started explaining, and this was the #2 guy at Planned Parenthood at the time. And he said, he was Robert, have you looked at where the population is growing? And I just remember being shocked at multiple levels. I was like,
right.
One, you assume, this guy's an unbelievable racist. I mean, I grew up in the South and I didn't hear this kind of thing. And then second, you just assume because I'm at Yale that I share your racial prejudice so much that you're willing to, hey, don't we all agree we got to get the blacks and the browns? We got to reduce those numbers. So that's what they're really about down deep. That look at where Gates has focused a lot of his attention. It's been Africa. It's been Asia. So he clearly has a eugenicist mindset. Anybody that knows the guy knows he's a core elitist to his bone. He used to give his potential girlfriends IQ test, that kind of thing. That's who he is at a core level. And so that's who you have running public health through the world. I mean, that's why almost every public health authority in the world went along with this. Things that we've never done in our history. I mean, there's another Johns Hopkins study came out last week. Said lockdowns didn't work. Mask mandates didn't work. Vaccine mandates didn't work. None of it worked. There's no objective evidence it worked. In fact, there's objective evidence it backfired, that the excess mortality in places that put more strict provisions in terms of public health interventions had worse excess mortality than places that did none. Right. It turns out like there's this one little tiny island. I'm going to look it up because I admit it's a good place to escape to. And the Indian Ocean was the only one to impose no public health interventions at all of any kind at any time. And so because even Sweden went along with some of this stuff. And Sweden, of course, didn't go along with all of it. And Sweden ended up a lot better off than most other places throughout Europe and the United States. But that's how they do it. They co-opt. They have a very dark, nefarious agenda.
Yeah.
That goes to food, that goes to health, that goes to control of your body, that goes to digital currencies. And all you got to do really is study Bill Gates's history. So, I mean, Klaus Schwab is open about a lot of this stuff. But if you want to look at the examples of what are some places where this has actually happened at some level, track Bill Gates's role in Kenya, track Bill Gates's role in India, track Bill Gates's role in a bunch of these places where he's a very controversial person for a very good reason. And again, during his philanthropy phase, he's managed to double his wealth. So it's been an interesting form of philanthropy.
Did you see that article that came out the other day? I think it was in Forbes or something like that. And the person was arguing that based on the science, that Thanos was actually the good guy in that Avengers movie. Did you see that?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. So this is what the mainstream media is now arguing. They're arguing for at the very least, population control, and maybe, yeah, there you go, right there. The science of the Avengers Endgame proves Thanos did nothing wrong. So based on
And
the science now, we need to eradicate half the human population on Earth.
exactly, it's their mindset. Is that they see people as cattle, and if they're not useful as consumers or laborers, they would like them to not be present. Period. And that's
Yeah,
just the nature of who they are. And it will disproportionately fall on the most politically vulnerable, much as eugenics did. I call it the recreation of eugenics. I mean, they're trying to do that legally. Like you look at the grounds. I mean, they were actually citing the Jacobson decision the University of Indiana did for its vaccine mandate.
I know.
And
I said that so many times. When as soon as you made me aware of that, I that was one of my battle cries. Almost every single debate I got into, I used that.
absolutely. I mean, when you're citing Buck v. Bell, maybe you're on the wrong side. As even Dershowitz, when I was debating Dershowitz, he was like, oh, okay, maybe I should reconsider. This kind of looks bad if I'm on the side of the eugenics decision.
Yeah,
But that's what they're trying to do, recreate the legal basis of eugenics in America.
yeah. All right, buddy. Well, I sure appreciate your time. Awesome conversation as always. For the listeners who want to find out more about what you do, tell them what you're doing with Viva and locals and all that good stuff.
Yeah, the one place to get all of the content and create your own content, and we have like hush hush videos on alternative theories about big public events throughout time, all that jazz. That's at vivabarneslaw.locals.com.
Okay, great. And Josh, can you do me a favor and throw that up in the? Okay, there you go. So
Oh,
everyone
it's
has it. Right?
vivabarneslaw.locals.com. There is a Barnes Law one, but the one the main one is vivabarneslaw.locals.com.
Yeah, he's Josh. You see, he's got it right here on his username. I want to just make sure he gets the right one in the link for or in the chat here. We'll put it in the description, Robert.
No problem.
You got it up there, Josh?
I'm working on it. 1 second. We'll put in the comments in the description.
Okay. Yeah, we'll just do it as the pinned comment. All right, Robert. Enjoy the rest of your day, buddy. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.